Hello and welcome to the latest Margin Notes episode with me, Simoney Kyriakou, editor of FT Advisor. We're in the video studio today with our very own deputy news editor, Sonia Rach. Now, a few years ago, she published her first financial book for children, Loose Change, Tina Learns to Save, which is aimed at primary school children. You can get it on Amazon. Getting children informed and interested in basic money management has always been a passion project for Sonia, as I know it is for many of you readers. And now, with Prime Minister Andy Burnham putting practical skills and financial education at the centre of his reform agenda for young people, the hope is that young students will leave school with practical competence in handling personal finances, in budgeting, and crucially, avoiding the debt pitfalls. But what more could we be doing, both journalists and financial advisors, to help promote financial literacy? Sonia, let's get personal. Why does financial education matter so much to you?
I guess for people that don't know me, I'm Indian, so I'm part of the South Asian community, and learning to save, learning to look after your money is something that we're taught from a really young age. And I think it stems from the fact that, our parents are first generation immigrants, so therefore they came here with very little. They had the wealth back, in East Africa for my parents, but they didn't have it here, and therefore had to kind of work hard, build their wealth, start from nothing. And so for them, all they knew is survival, right? All they knew is we have to save everything. We got to work more hours and put in more work and jobs and do whatever we need to do to have that money. And so it's kind of instilled into who I am today, because I'm very conscious with where I spend my money, what I spend it on. And it's really good values that we've sort of been taught. And I think a lot of South Asian community, but also a lot of other communities probably have a similar sort of understanding. But I think the one thing I wasn't taught was investing. And one of the main things that I didn't really understand is, the concept of interest, mortgages, things like that, that I guess are sort of essential to know, right? But I didn't get taught them, and I can't blame my parents for not teaching me them, because they didn't really know it themselves, or maybe they didn't sort of know to pass that on.
Exactly.
But I think it stems from the fact that I'm every single person, irrespective of where they come from, should have the same level of basic understanding. And, we learn about the human body at school, we learn about normal maths, but we don't really learn about money. And it just doesn't really make sense as to why. So, it kind of stems, it's a bit more deep-rooted, but that's where it comes from.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, we do hear about money at school, and children are taught to count, the change from £10, but they're not really taught about how to invest it, certainly not even necessarily how to save it.
Yeah.
And I've heard a maxim once, rich people invest, poor people save. And if we want to kind of reduce that sort of that wealth gap in the UK and make it much smaller, we want to get more people investing, not just saving. But when it comes to sort of, writing this book, because it's about Tina learning to save, but you do tackle things like compound interest and investing. So could you talk a little bit more about what prompted you to write this book for sort of 7-year-olds on the concepts of investing?
Yeah, so I mean, it very much came from a statistic that many people may know or may not know, but money habits are set by the age of 7. And actually, it's not just money habits. A lot of habits are set by the age of 7. And it is that sort of made me think, oh my God, you learn it so young. How can this not be taught? And I think because of my own passion for financial education, the need for it, I sort of started looking around to think, actually, I can buy this for nieces, nephews, friends, kids, and a book that, or even a game or something that will teach them about financial education or kind of the concept of money. And it just took me by surprise that there wasn't actually that much out there in the UK market. And there's a fair bit in the US, but there's just actually not that much in the UK. And I thought, I need to use my role as a journalist, as someone that is passionate about this, as someone that has sat, some of the CII exams, to use that ability and knowledge to try and explain this for children in a way that they can hopefully process and understand. And I was going to just initially do saving, but it kind of made me realize that I know how to save, but I didn't know how to invest until I got a job in the industry and learnt it kind of on the job. So I wanted to teach interest and kind of banks and what their role is and that sort of thing.
And how has the reception to this been among sort of educators and parents?
So I think I've been really lucky. It's been really well received. I received a lot of support from firms, from advisors, from people in the industry, from parents. But I do a lot of book readings at schools, at libraries, and you know, when I published it, I was pregnant at the time and I didn't get to do as much initially. I did a few events, but not that much. But when I came back from maternity leave, I spent a lot more time doing these book readings. And it's just amazing to me, you know, the support I've received and the how it's been received by parents and educators has been amazing. But what took me the most by surprise is the children. You know, when I go into these schools, I ask these children before I start doing the book reading, you know, what is a bank? What is interest? What is saving? You know, where do you spend money? Where do you get money from? And I just try and gauge where their knowledge is at before I read the book. And then I read the book. And when I ask them these questions at the end again to see how much they've actually retained, it just blows my mind.
They're like sponges, aren't they?
And it's just amazing because it kind of makes that whole concrete money habits are set by the age of 7, just brings it to life almost, because you're like, actually, yeah, they've taken away so much, and that's just from one, you know, half an hour book reading. So you can just imagine if they were getting so much more, that would be they would be leaving school with so much more knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it needs to be something that parents and family members really get on board with. And I remember a few months ago, I was with my son. I was just putting his money in to his. We do a monthly savings for him in an ISA. I was putting it in. I was showing him how his ISA has performed. Yeah. And, you know, there was a big sort of market hiccup caused by someone who lives across the pond. And I was just showing him the impact of that. And a family member, walked by and said, don't want to talk to him all about. He doesn't understand any of that. Do you understand what that is? And he just said, no. And I said, but I know he doesn't understand. That's why I'm trying to talk to him, I'm trying to educate him. And if you give this impression, oh, he's too young to know any of that, then he's going to think, oh, I'm too young to know any of that. Then the doors are shut, and then it takes longer for him to learn and understand. So I think you're absolutely right. It's really important to get these quite complex messages put across very simply to young people so that they can build on it for their life, and that financial resilience really grows. Now, a bit earlier, you just mentioned that you're doing your CII exams and you wanted to use your position as a journalist. How else are you using your position as a financial journalist to help spread the message, as it were?
I think one of the things that I realised very quickly was if I hadn't landed in this industry as a financial journalist, and if I didn't get the first job in the space, I would still probably not know that much about investing or pension and the importance of a pension. And it's only after I speak to people, you know, within my community, with friends and, you know, colleagues and whoever else, that you realise actually how much we do know just because of what we do and how much other people don't know. So it started off by just friends being like, can you just explain this to me? Or, you know, oh, I'm going on maternity leave. Can you explain what I need to do with my pension? And it very quickly made me realise that that's not something that a lot of people know, and it's not really fair that they don't know it. And also made me have a bit of a reality check that had I not got here, I would be in the same position as a lot of other people if I wasn't working here. So it kind of forced me to do those exams, because I thought, well, I write for financial advisors. I want to know this. I want to have a good amount of knowledge so I'm understanding the stuff that I write about. So I sat some of the exams, but then also I want to develop my own knowledge and be able to share that. So while I'm not an advisor and, you know, I'm not changing my profession, just having that understanding is helpful. I know, I think I love my job as a journalist too much.
Yes, thank you very much. Don't leave me.
But yeah, no, so I think that's kind of why I've used the role that I have as a journalist to talk about it more, kind of go on social media, explain certain topics that hopefully will simplify it for people in the space.
And you're using your Instagram channel to help spread the message.
Yeah. One thing that I realised very quickly was whenever I was trying to talk about financial education for kids and why it's important, a lot of mums, you know, I'd get a message or I'd get people saying to me, but I don't feel confident. I don't understand this topic. I don't understand it. So how can I then be teaching my child that? And I was like, actually, that's so true, because I almost became blind to the fact that, oh, just teach your children. But if you don't lack that confidence and you don't feel like you're going to teach the right thing, of course you're going to be more hesitant to teach that to your child. So then I had to sort of go back and be like, actually, I want the women and parents in general, but what I found was a lot of women, and especially like new moms, working moms, that wanted that knowledge so that they could feel empowered to make their decisions and therefore can pass on that knowledge to, you know, children. So it's kind of a knock-on effect, because obviously if they don't feel it, then they're not going to be comfortable teaching their children that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the social media, and expose kind of big topics that perhaps are not coming into their daily life and simplify it so they understand it.
Yeah, I had this conversation recently with my mum, and she said that her mum, although she didn't really work, she did like little part-time work sometimes in an office, but she would always have long conversations with literally the guy from the Pru, who would come to her house and on a Friday, and they'd sit down, he'd have a cup of tea, he'd talk her through the life insurance policy, take the 2 guineas or whatever it was, and then and go off. And it was a really interesting conversation because my mum said then from her mother, she learned the basics of budgeting, investing, saving. She understood what insurance was. That's why my mother went and did all her 11 exams with the CII.
Oh, wow.
No, she hasn't got any certificate yet, but you know, she did her 11 exams. And so she became knowledgeable about finance because her own mother, who had no financial education or background or training, had simply had someone there to talk with her every single week, just about the life insurance and how things were. And I think we've lost that personal touch, really, because of the yard, because there's been this advice gap growing. We've lost that personal connection with people that can just explain basic concepts to us. It's not advice. So I'm hoping that the targeted support will really go a long way towards kind of improving that. But I think the government could do a lot more to help promote financial education at all levels. And I know that's a passion of yours. What do you think the government could be doing more? Or what should they be doing more?
Yeah, I mean, there are some amazing people in the industry that have been, you know, petitioning, campaigning to get financial education into schools. And, you know, thankfully it is coming next year, September 2028, so 2 years, but it's coming. So that's really positive to know. But I feel like the one thing that, you know, is unclear and maybe it will happen is how are children learning this? You know, are there experts that are coming in to train these teachers on these topics? Because if a lot of the teachers, again, don't have that knowledge, how are they teaching that on? They themselves feel like, you know, they don't know it. Oh, and I go into schools and I speak to the teachers. They're like, oh, you know, like, it's really well put together, but, you know, I wish I knew this, or I wish I was taught this. And I just feel like there needs to be more done for teachers to have the training and the expertise, but also to have people in the industry that come in and maybe do these sessions, because I can just say from the ones that I've done, I see the impact, and I can just imagine that if there's people that are more senior in their roles, more, you know, a bigger expert on a specific topic, if they come in and talk about tax or something, that's going to go a lot further and they're going to learn a lot more. But the funding needs to come from the government, because where else is it coming from? So,
exactly,
you know, that's one of the main things I think they need to do more of.
Yeah, and obviously we're doing our part. You know, you're doing your part as a financial journalist. And earlier this year, FT Advisor did the Little Acorn series, with lots of games created by Anita Boniface and her financial advisor friend to help kind of give people ideas of using games to explain difficult concepts very simply. But so much more needs to be done. And I think there's not enough support for even companies that are doing this as well. A lot of them are doing it pro bono. But it'd be great if the government could kind of give more materials, more information, so schools and educators and parents could have that to hand. What would you like to see from the readers of FT Advisor? What would you like our readers to do?
Well, I think one of the main things is, you know, financial advisors in the industry have been in the industry for a fair amount of time. You know, they've got a wealth of knowledge, they've got so much expertise, and especially those that I guess are retired or retiring or maybe kind of slowing down. Having someone of that credibility to go into the schools and give some sort of explanation on a complex topic, or break it down, or even just kind of make a game or something like that would go a long way. But I actually think it's a double whammy there, because we know, writing about financial advice, that there's a shortage of financial advisors and we need more people in the industry. But if you work backwards, the main reason that there aren't actually that many is because people also don't know about it as a profession. You know, when you think of a maths or business-based profession, it's often accounting is like the main one that comes up, or maybe actuary, or like, you know, certain things like that. But advice is one that I think drops off a lot of the time. So if kids are seeing advisors go into school to talk about a certain topic, you're exposing them to this whole nother financial advice profession, and perhaps that will have a knock-on effect. So I think there's like two ways to it, but it would be really good if more financial advisors could come in and actually do these sessions in schools, because there are a lot of organisations already there that help to arrange those relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and be supported by the accrediting bodies. I know many accrediting bodies do support them in this, but just give that extra materials to support. And
definitely.
Maybe to all have a copy of this in your advice firms ready for that client that comes in with young children. But Sonia, thank you very much for talking to us. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me on.
And thank you for watching. Look, another shameless plug for the book here. It's on Amazon. It's a great one to share with your clients and their children. But I also want to shamelessly plug ftflick.com. That's FTFLIC. FTFlick is the FT's proprietary financial literacy charity. And to find out what we're doing to help boost financial resilience among young people in marginalised communities, go to ftflick.com. And until next time, take care.